Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here with breaking news. We are right now in the midst of a new space weather impact. The solar wind has strengthened, and this is likely to increase geomagnetic volatility across the planet over the next few hours today. So simple translation, things are about to get wild energetically, and well, we're already in the midst of a global seismic burst. We had the magnitude 7.4 earthquake, which devastated Colombia on the 10th of August, the magnitude 7.7, which struck Indonesia on the 14th, 2 days after that total solar eclipse. That displaced 13,000 people as of right now. A day later, a magnitude 6.9 struck Indonesia. So it's been very active seismically. And usually with these global seismic bursts, once they start up, they take some time to die down. So we could be looking at more high magnitude 6.5 plus, magnitude 7 plus activity. We could get a megaquake, magnitude 8 plus. That's certainly possible. We do have these two coronal holes here on the sun. These are very well correlated with earthquake activity specifically. Not only do they load the earth with energy via the reverse piezoelectric effect down in the crust, they also act as a trigger at times, depending on the stress of the fault when these coronal holes sweep by and go geo-effective. And so we're already in this space weather impact from a sequence of activity that occurred on the 14th. I'm sure you've seen that, the plasma filament that launched out and then the shock wave that happened right afterwards. There was also a big far side explosion the same day. So we'll see that when it cycles. And often we see these sort of big solar flares with big earthquakes. We could get that again. We do have some pretty big sunspots. Here's that plasma filament. There's the shock wave. And watch up here, you'll see the far side kind of shock wave go out. There it is. It's very faint to see there, but basically we're already in it. This is likely to continue. The one saving grace that we have, and we'll see how much this matters, is the fact that these two coronal holes are not connected together. They're not as big as they could be because they are not stretching through the equator. So it's not a trans-equatorial coronal hole. And the solar wind flows out not only along the equator, but also above and below. But this sunspot there, right in between them on the equator, is disrupting that high-speed stream a little bit. So we're not going to have as strong of a connection to this high-speed stream geomagnetically as we could have had. So that may be our saving grace as it relates to maybe a further continuation of this global seismic burst. And also these coronal holes are connected to terrestrial weather as well, okay? So there's good research connecting them to tornado and cyclone activity for certain parts of the globe at certain times of year. Also just simply like rainfall patterns and more. We just had Hurricane Lala, Category 1, slam the Hawaiian Islands. We had some parts of the Big Island receive more than 40 inches of rain. A lot of spots reached more than 20 inches of rain. There have been bridges and roads that were washed out, and there's some houses that were washed away. So this is a big deal, and it really came out of nowhere. So that's the sort of activity that we can expect going forward for the next few days as this energetic volatility continues, driven by space weather and already driven by this release of energy globally from these high magnitude earthquakes. Because that energy has to go out somewhere. It reverberates across the earth, the seismic waves spread out, they overlap multiple times, they load into new faults, new plate boundaries, and it just kind of begets more activity over and over and over until finally it dies out. So that's where we are right now. That's what this video is all about. Let's jump right into it. We'll begin by looking at our 131 angstrom imagery of the sun. And by the way, this sort of imagery is only viewable from space. To answer a few of your questions, you can't get these sort of observations from the ground because this is soft X-ray radiation, gets absorbed into Earth's upper atmosphere, meaning none of this light reaches the surface basically. So you need to put a telescope in space to see it. Now, we've been having a notable increase in solar flare activity, and as a result, this higher frequency light flux from the sun over the past few days because of new sunspot growth. So we'll see a 4.1 C-class flare after this filament right there on the 14th of August. We had some other C-class flares that popped off, and then we had a bigger 8.2 C-class flare yesterday on the 16th. And so this really isn't tremendous activity in terms of solar flares. These aren't M-class or X-class flares, which we will see again, and we have seen already during this solar cycle. Often you get some of the strongest solar flares during the descending phase, but there's been a significant change going from even lower levels of activity to now. So there has been, just in general, more ionization of Earth's ionosphere and more plasma created as a result of this shift going from very low levels to more moderate levels of activity, which is what C-class flare activity represents. So here we see that with our 14-day view of X-ray flux. And you notice that we were basically at B levels here, but started to go down, really bottomed around the 9th. We did start to get some C-class activity, but in general, it was quite a bit lower than it was here. Baseline was certainly lower. And look how we've ramped up. There is that 4.1 C-class flare on the 14th, and there is the 8.2 on the 16th. And so just in general, Earth's ionosphere is more charged up, it's more active, and that means that any sort of space weather that does come in has a little bit more to work with. This all is connected to earthquake activity. It may not be the most important factor, but we know there's a connection there because there's tons of research showing high magnitude earthquakes and disturbances to the ionosphere coinciding in time and location, pre-earthquake signals, earthquake lights, things of this nature. So here we see our earthquake activity for the past day. You'll notice our strongest is this 5.8 that struck Kamchatka today at 12:38 Universal Time. This is almost exactly 24 hours after Kluchevskoye volcano up here had a very large eruption, sending ash cloud up about 10,000 meters. So tons of activity still from the volcanoes here, which are a little out of sight and out of mind, but this is where some of the most volcanic activity is occurring right now on the globe. Mount Etna has still been active. Some new flank eruptions occurring as well. So this is also a huge hotspot for volcanic activity globally at this moment in time. But let's go over to Indonesia, because we see here in the past 24 hours still a tremendous amount of earthquake activity as a result of that 7.7. These are all aftershocks here, 5.7 being the strongest, 50 kilometers down. But if we go to our 7-day view, we'll see just how many earthquakes magnitude 4.5 and greater have struck. And we see that there have been 63 aftershocks, magnitude 4.5 and greater. Of course, the 7.7 is the strongest, one 6.1 magnitude earthquake aftershock. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a 6.5, 6.8 aftershock to strike in the next few days. That's probably what we should expect, but it's not guaranteed. But that's very likely to happen. Probably like 20 to 50% chance that happens. We are seeing tons of magnitude 5s. So there have been 27 magnitude 5 earthquakes which have ruptured now as part of this aftershock swarm. You see that the fault rupture was across this entire length. So this was a big earthquake that occurred, and it's also been spreading out like this with these aftershocks. So it's been a huge release of energy globally, seismically, and that's going to continue. This is a 6.9 that struck here just a day later. And we also then, of course, had the 6.1 Vanuatu earthquake off to the side. So this is all part of that global seismic burst, Colombia being in there as well, but not for the past week. That was, again, back on the 10th. So just a little bit more than a week ago now. But this is where we are, and I would not be surprised that if we get more magnitude 6.5 earthquakes to pop, more magnitude 7s, we could even get a surprise megaquake. I mean, it wouldn't really be a surprise. You're due for about one every single year. That is the statistical average, and the last one was more than a year ago. That was the magnitude 8.8. We've had tons of earthquake activity this year and last year as a result of that. So when you have this new space weather impact coming in, and you have all the solar flare activity that we've been having, and you have the coronal holes on the sun, well, things start to get spicy. And it looks like the solar wind right now is starting to get a little spicy because we see our solar wind has strengthened. It's now 10 nanotesla, 2 times stronger than normal. That's the total field strength. But importantly, the Z component, the vertical component, has flipped negative. And so we see it there at negative 7.25 nanotesla, meaning it has a strong connection to Earth's magnetic field. They're opposite, so now they're connecting. The solar wind velocity is not that high. We see it's only at 355 kilometers per second. Density is pretty good at about 11 particles per cubic centimeter. So this isn't the strongest impact, but it is coming in, and we are expecting those coronal hole high-speed stream impacts to then further add into this. And those last usually some time. So we're talking about today, the 17th, the 18th, the 19th. All that's probably going to be a bit more active than normal. Will we hit G1 or G2 levels? That's minor to moderate geomagnetic storming. That's a good question. I think it's likely we get to probably G1 levels at some point, but I don't suspect that this is going to be a super strong geomagnetic storm reaching G2 or G3. Who knows? But it's not really shaping up thus far to be like that. But when you already have this global seismic burst, right, you may not need that much more of an extra kick to keep it going. We're not starting out from zero here. You may need a bigger impact to really get things going, let's say. But since we're already popping with these earthquakes, you may not need that much more loading in to keep things going. So that's where we are right now with our space weather and with our earthquake activity. Now let's do some coverage of this hurricane that slammed into the Hawaiian Islands. So here we have our latest satellite imagery, and we see now Hurricane Lala is a tropical storm. It has now descended from Category 1 activity, but it was Category 1 right as it was slamming past the Hawaiian Islands. The eye wall did not make landfall. That would be quite remarkable considering just how tall the big island is. So that usually steers these storms away. But basically this was a direct impact, as close as you can get really for a direct impact, especially for the big island. Just check out the size of this cyclone. It was a monster, and it barreled right through, dumping tons of water across the islands. Not just the big island, but also Maui, Oahu, Kauai, the others. So we can see some of that here. Here is imagery of Rainbow Falls, an 80-foot tall waterfall on the east side of the big island. And normally it's an impressive waterfall. You go there, you see it. This is like super charged with rainfall discharge. So there's been a huge amount of discharge as a result of Hurricane Lala, and this really has been quite devastating for the eastern side of the big island because of that. We've had roads and bridges get washed away. Here we can see some of that imagery, and this is taken near Pahala, which is actually where you get a bunch of earthquakes occurring about 30 to 50 kilometers down as a result of a magma sill complex which connects Mauna Loa and also Kilauea. So I don't know how all this extra rainfall being introduced into the groundwater reservoirs, which are huge for Hawaii, is going to influence volcanic activity, if at all, but maybe it's going to make it a little bit more explosive. The systems are super interconnected. So there's already crews working to clear the roads, but some of them just got completely washed out, eroded out, bridges gone. And so there's some people which are living there completely cut off now as a result of these road closures. Most of the big island had power outages when the hurricane was going over. I don't know the current state of the power grid situation there, but also a lot of people on the big island have their own solar and battery packs and just in general energy generation. So a lot of people roughing it right now as a result of this impact. And we can see some of these rainfall totals here. Now, before we just go through this list, let me actually show you the map, okay? Because I feel this is a little bit better. So this is a preliminary rainfall report across the Hawaiian Islands. And this is for this time frame of 2 a.m. Hawaii Standard Time, Friday through 10 p.m. Sunday. And you see that it really dropped off as the hurricane weakened and continued to go to the west. You know, it was Category 1 right in this zone here. And so we see that the big island really saw the most activity with Lauapohohoa at 43.54 inches, Nahuku at 37.16 inches, and other locations also well exceeding 35 inches of rain in almost no time at all basically. You see that the rainfall totals were quite a bit less for the western side. Here we see our legend, and so light blue is only 0 to 3, and there's actually some locations here which are in drought. So they really didn't get much. A lot of that precipitation hit because of the volcanoes, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, the slopes, the elevation, and just caused it to drop. And in fact, it even snowed at the top of Mauna Kea. So remember, it's August. It snows up there typically during the winter, but because this hurricane was just so crazy, and I guess the temperatures were low enough that there was reported snowfall at the summit of Mauna Kea in August. So you've seen everything if you've seen that, basically. So this is pretty wild. But we see that other islands also got hit. I mean, Maui here on the eastern side, they got hit quite a bit with some totals exceeding 20 inches, especially like the upper slopes, right? If we go over to Kauai, they also had quite a high rainfall total, but this is one of the highest rainfall total locations in the world, like annual rainfall. So not surprised that they got quite a bit there. And we see, for example, Oahu here getting 13.1 inches at Manoa Lion. So some of these peaks, they definitely got a lot, but then it was more like 3, 5, 8 inches for a lot of locations across the Hawaiian Islands. So if we go back to our rainfall totals here, you'll see just how many locations, though, did get 20 plus inches. I mean, you can just read this list. These, again, are preliminary numbers, but very, 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 very high. Okay, so it's been a big impact, and relief efforts are now just beginning and going. We saw wind gust, peak wind gusts at Mauna Kea summit going to 140 miles per hour, which is huge. 91 for this location there, and other locations, you know, a lot of them seeing wind gusts beyond 70 miles per hour. So this was a big cyclone impact. Kona here having nearly 80 mile per hour wind gusts. So it's been a big deal. And again, we see this discharge here from Rainbow Falls. So the islands are discharging this now. There is a risk of landslides. There's a risk of just more kind of problems downstream of this, especially if we get some earthquake activity at Hawaii. That could be a problem. We can kind of get a glimpse into what's happening by tracking the volcano, Kilauea. So here we see our tilt data for Kilauea past year. And you notice that this kind of looks a little bizarre compared to the rest of this data set here, where it's a little bit more normal with, you know, the eruption, deflation, and then just recharges, deflation, boom, boom, boom. And we can really see how odd this is by looking at our 3-month data. And so we see these have all been fairly normal, though some periods of deflation with inflation there. But look at this long period deflation there. It was quite deep. It was very long in duration, suddenly changing to rapid inflation right as the magnitude 5.2 earthquake struck the seamount off the southeast coast of the big island that is Kama'aheo Kanaloa. And then we had episode 53. We had a very quick reinflation there, but then this long period of deflation and just in general settling out again as that cyclone hit. And so we see a little bit more noise in our tilt data as a result of Hurricane Lala. Now it's starting to recharge, but you get even more context. Again, see that spike? That is because of that 5.2 earthquake which struck the seamount. If we go down here to our Kilauea East Rift Zone, we see finally now some inflation from the Rift Zone. So here is our 5.2, and then just a few days later, boom, we go up a little bit. And if we look at our longer time frame, we see that we've been going down for 3 months. Now we get this little increase. Maybe not a trend breaker yet, but worth noting. Here's our past year. This has been going down, 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 and now with this 5.2, a little bit of an increase. So maybe it continues its downward deflation after this, but as of right now, we're seeing finally a bit of a shift with the inflation at the East Rift Zone, which is responsible for a lot of destruction back in 2018. And this is all converging with the 5.2 that struck the seamount, the Category 1 cyclone, which swept past the islands, and a historic 53rd eruption from Kilauea, which, you know, this has been the fastest these lava fountain episodes have ever occurred in just about 1 year and 8 months, going back to December of 2024. So a lot of changes right now occurring specifically for the Big Island. And we'll see when the next big eruption will be for Kilauea. They've been really synchronized perfectly with the lunar cycle for the past 5 eruptions. So if I had to just put out an initial forecast, I'd say on the full moon is when it's going to be likely, but it's going to have to really catch up to do that, because we're nearly at the quarter moon right now. So quarter moon is going to be on the 19th. So we have like 9 days until the full moon basically. So we'll see how inflation resumes at Kilauea, but right now locals are more concerned about cleanup and recovery efforts after Hurricane Lala, which just swept over the Big Islands, and now it has passed, it is gone. Thankfully, it has weakened also quite a bit, which is good. So it's no longer really a concern, though they do have this projection here sweeping up to the north. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to be likely that it just, does this loop, but we've seen weird things before with cyclones. We've seen weirder things. So we hope that it just basically continues off into the sunset, dissipates down. But there are areas of potential development near the Hawaiian Islands. And just in general, the Pacific has been choppy. I was out at the ocean yesterday, and the waves are coming in, and just a little bit more chaos in the water because of this super El Nino, which is building. So keep that in mind. So that's your update for today. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy. Make sure to smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. Subscribe to stay up to date on what is happening energetically here on Earth. I release videos almost daily covering earthquakes, volcanoes, severe weather, geomagnetic storming, solar activity, space weather, planetary alignments and resonances, interstellar and cosmic forces, how they all converge and combine together. The big thing that I am watching right now are these coronal holes and the continuation of this global seismic burst. So if something happens, I will be on it as soon as possible with a live stream. And by the way, if you've been seeing my videos and watching them, then going back to my channel page and wondering, hey, where's that video? I can't find it. There's a videos tab and there's also a live stream tab. So live streams live on the live stream page and videos live on the video page. I do both. So thank you all so much. Wishing each and every single one of you well. Please take care of yourselves. I'll see you all in the next video.